Soaring fuel prices have Americans panicking as the effects of everything in fuel affects everything in our lives. The cost of fuel is based on two things: supply and demand, and speculation. Now, this is what the White House apparently doesn't understand. Our oil consumption is constant. It always will be, okay? Some 20 some odd million barrels a day. And the Biden administration's response to this, which they sought praise from Americans from, was releasing 30 million barrels from our strategic oil reserves. That's like 29 hours of energy, folks. It's really not a big deal. Prior to Biden taking office, we were energy independent, and we didn't need to worry about murderous dictators like Putin, and their oil production was irrelevant to us. Ironically enough, we import about 600,000 barrels a day from Russia. Meanwhile, the Keystone Pipeline would have provided nearly 900,000 barrels a day. Now, Jen Psaki's willful ignorance of this should shock you. Take a listen to this.
You think that opening the Keystone Pipeline and having more energy-friendly policies might do that?
The Keystone Pipeline has never been operational. It would take years for that to have any impact. I know a number of members of Congress have suggested that, but that is a proposed solution that has no relationship or would have no impact on what the problem is. We here all agree is an issue.
Folks, the prospect of being able to import more oil effectively will immediately drive down the price of oil in America. We call this the concept of futures. Now, if you buy large quantities of oil as a company or an industry, you hedge your purchase against the market predictions. If future supply is about to increase, the price will go down due to the abundance of the commodity. And that, Ms. Psaki and professors and economists everywhere, that is how our oil market works. So, for more on this, let's bring in the Director of Government Affairs for MAC Energy Corporation, Claire Chase. Claire, welcome to Wake Up America.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
So, you know, obviously you work in the private sector and you understand that the futures of stuff, the predictions of oil supply do things. So you recently claimed that America is facing a crisis of President Biden's making. And this is in relation to oil and gas, obviously, calling his failed energy policies and support for this industry disingenuous. I mean, would this have ever happened under Trump? But also, you know, how are they getting it so wrong?
First of all, that's a really great question. How are they getting it so wrong? And second, I think it's, for one, you have laid this out in an incredible way. So the narrative that the White House is trying to spin that, well, they have 9,000 permits approved that these oil companies haven't drilled, is the part that to me is a little disingenuous, because while we might have 9,000 permits approved, there are a number of other factors that it takes for us to be able to actually start producing oil out of a well. You know, we've got to actually drill it, and that's been very difficult because in order to access those leases, we also have to have something called a right-of-way to be able to build the road. You know, these leases are sort of out in the middle of ranch land or federal land, and so you've got to be able to build a road to get there, and then to lay lines to move the product from the location to a truck or to another pipeline in order to get it to a refinery to be sold. So they're not approving our rights of way. We can't access the lease, and that becomes a problem.
Well, the other thing, too is these 9,000 leases, they're not approving. There's like a million different permits you have to get from a million different bureaucracies, and they're just not approving the permits that you need to actually start the project. On top of that, they're saying, well, we're not giving you any guarantee. So they might revoke that lease in a year, which is not a profitable solution.
No, it's very difficult to operate under that kind of uncertainty for anybody. And so it's, you know, what happens as well is that it takes a year for the federal government to approve an application for a permit to drill. Here in New Mexico, it's more like 30 days. And in Texas, I think it's like maybe 2 days. So we have to plan a year in advance. And under COVID, that was really difficult because the economies were opening up and shutting down and opening up and shutting down. So you remember about a year ago, we dropped down to, you know, below zero on the futures contracts. And so it's oil companies, we can't react overnight. It takes us a while to ramp that production back up, to drill more wells. And again, to Jen Psaki's comment about Keystone Pipeline, and your response to that is exactly right. Yes, it will take a while to build Keystone and to have that operational. But if the oil is coming onto the market, that's a futures contract, that drives the price of oil down, that brings down the price of gasoline, and that is what helps American consumers.
Yeah, I don't understand why it's so hard. Like you summed it up in a sentence. I mean, it should be easy to tell Joe Biden. I mean, like, he's got these Green New Deal leash holders that just say, don't drill no matter what, electric cars. But what's the effect on the grid? I mean, if you double the electricity demand, don't you need carbon to keep that up?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do believe the electricity grid requires natural gas as well as coal in order to be able to allow us to have electricity in our homes. So if you're plugging more cars into that, and by the way, not everyone can afford a Tesla.
Right.
So I'm not really sure where he thinks that directive is going to make a lot of sense. But that seems to be the case under this president.